This started as a first impression and one-day burn down of a single gun, but has since exploded into a two-gun deep dive. So if you can bear with the changes in video, tone, and editing, you're about to get all the practical information you could want on the big, iconic, terrible, and wonderful piece of hardware that is the Magnum Research Desert Eagle pistol. What is this video? Why is this video? Everyone knows the Desert Eagle. Usually it's in its 50 Action Express form, but this one's in the original 357 Magnum. It's not the classic model. This is the lightweight at 59 ounces L6 with a 6-inch barrel, top and bottom Picatinny rails, and a nice integrated muzzle brake. To the uninitiated, the Desert Eagle is the coolest damn handgun there is. To the more experienced, it's overpriced garbage. But to everyone, it's simply a presence, one of a kind. One of several models, 4 calibers, and entirely too many color options of a kind. But this model, with some modern improvements and in the original chambering the gun was designed for, may be its best chance to prove its worth, the most reliable and affordable caliber with the largest capacity. From first shots through a few hundred rounds, this is a chance to break the stigma of being a safe queen or once-a-year range toy and earn its place as maybe a once-a-month range toy. First things first. Normally I wouldn't even consider an unboxing, but after taking a peek at this icon, there were a couple things I just had to share. So inside the chunky Magnum Research box, you get 60 ounces of pistol, a branded gun sock with the characteristic Desert Eagle slant, and then a few other goodies like a US pocket constitution and an operator's DVD. And I just figured that was worth going over. I swear there were 2 mags in this box when I got it, but one of them disappeared between the FFL and home, so I ordered 4 more to help us with what we're about to do. And what is that exactly? Now, the Desert Eagle comes with a list of recommended ammunition, never a great sign. With many reviewers acknowledging the accuracy of its fixed barrel and decent trigger, that questionable reliability remains the strongest mark against it. But for such an iconic gun, there isn't all that much real content about it. Honest Outlaw has done a few long videos on his, an L5 model, similar but slightly smaller than this one, and they may be some of the most comprehensive on the topic. Probably just because for all its popularity, the gun is something of a pariah among actual shooters and comes with a cost to turn away the merely curious. We have what looks like 400 rounds of 357 ammunition here, some from the recommended list and some not. We're going to shoot this thing until it malfunctions, clear it if we can, and keep going, making a note of what ammunition it does and does not like along the way. And now, finally, to business, starting with MagTech 158 grain semi-jacketed hollow points from the recommended ammo list. All right, surprisingly controllable so far. Let's try something a little smaller. That is an incredibly fun fucking gun to shoot. You can stop recording though. So I was discussing how the manual says in 3 separate places to shoot this gun with a modified Weaver stance, pulling with the offhand and pushing with the primary hand when pulling the trigger. We tried that a few times, no problems. I tried a regular Weaver stance a few times, no problems. But when going back to regular, earlier this magazine, we encountered a dead trigger. There was no dent in the primer, but the gun did fail to fire with a live round in the chamber. So instead of fucking around with stances, I'm just gonna go back to isosceles and shoot the gun like a human being. Yeah, it works pretty good when you just hold it normally. All right, we're about 27-30 rounds in so far with one malfunction that I will chalk up to stance related. We're gonna move on to the MagTech 158 grain flat nose. Of note, all of the recommended ammunition is 158 grain. Again, regular isosceles shooting stance. All right, no issues there. Let's try for another magazine. Helps if you aim, huh? have had two malfunctions now, the second of which was a failure to feed, and it occurs to me that I intended to give this gun a little bit of a lube before we started. Now the manual doesn't recommend a break-in period or initial lubrication or anything, so we held off on that, but if we run into any more trouble with recommended ammo, we might give it that bit of remedial action. So we're just gonna keep going as is, and one thing I wanted to mention, that's not a very good shot, there we go, is just how much fun this gun is to shoot. It's just a blast in all possible senses. So one thing we noted while testing this out here is that the magazine is only rated for 9 rounds, but you can kind of wedge a 10th one in there. And considering we're okay for reliability so far, let's see if it actually works. Good sign. Okay. Ten shots, good to go. We may have lost a little bit of footage. We are now 2 malfunctions in with the flat nose. So we've taken the gun apart, added a little bit of lubricant to the slide rails and the bolt head here, which we'll get into in a moment. We're gonna shoot a few more rounds of the recommended ammo and then talk a little bit more about the gun on a technical level. Now that we're about 100 rounds in, a couple quick tech specs on the gun. It is actually, as many of you will know, a gas piston design. This is a short stroke gas piston like the AR-180 or Steyr AUG with a rotating bolt like you would find on a rifle. This goes a huge way towards taming the recoil and allows it to handle the higher pressures of the cartridges it's actually chambered in. Now, the trigger is single action with a pretty crisp pull. See if we can get a read here. It's coming in at 7 pounds. This is a manual reader, so not that accurate. We're gonna try that one more time, a little lower down. 5 pounds, that sounds a little more like what we're after. It's a very crisp pull, but the reset is very mushy. So not the best in that regard, but still decent kicking off point. We're going to move on to the Blazer 158 grain still jacketed hollow points. These aren't actually on the recommended ammo list, but they've served me very well in a couple other firearms, so we're gonna give them a shot. Hope they do okay. One mag down, not bad. The controls on this gun are enormously fiddly. As you may see, the safety's hard to reach, the mag release is hard to reach. And we have our third malfunction. Let's see what we're looking at. Same as the others, a failure to feed. Getting a little sticky, I think. Admittedly, not recommended ammo, but the fact that it's malfing in the same way indicates to me that that is a bigger issue with the gun. This has been a bit of a reliability disaster so far, but not so much with the recommended ammo. And only one of those malfs has been grip related, so we're just gonna try one-handed and see what the limit of that issue really is. It's my shooting, apparently. So that's a full magazine one-handed, so you really got to try to limp wrist this thing with 357. To continue with the experimentation, we're going to try this New Republic 357. It's still a 158 grain full metal jacket. This is a very affordable local rebrand of, I believe, a foreign ammunition. My hopes aren't high, but if it works, this gun just got a lot cheaper to shoot. It's very soft recoiling. It's almost like 38 out of a larger revolver. Doesn't stop my flinch though, Jesus. All right, that's a very good sign, I think. Since the gun's been cycling with a light 357 load, we're gonna see how it does with 38 Special plus P. See what happened. Failure to eject. Give it another shot. Same thing. I think we can decisively say it will not cycle 38 of any variety. Fourth mag. Oh, and we are not quite in battery, and I had a nice flinch dip. This gun is a huge amount of fun to shoot, but it does kind of wear on you for a while, as much because it weighs 4 pounds at the end of your grip as any of the recoil, which is pretty well tamed by the brake. All right, so continue the ammo testing. This is Hornady Lever Evolution. They're Spitzer tipped lever action rounds. I expect this is gonna kick a little harder or just give us a bunch of flash because of unburned powder. But theoretically, that Spitzer tip should give us more reliable feeding. Let's see. Not so much. Let's see what happened. This looks like a failure to feed. We'll run out the mag. Again, not recommended ammo. Failure to feed again. Last round. Okay, so not a big fan of the Lever Evolution, perhaps understandably. Now the Lever Evolution, what it lacks in reliability and affordability for that matter, this is probably a mistake, it should make up for in accuracy. So I'm just curious if we get any better results from slow fire. Okay. Okay, so the group widened up after the second mouth. I think my hands just got a little shaky. The first 4 were 1, 2, 3, 4, which ain't bad. We're looking at 2.5 inches maybe, and then the rest I just kind of sent wherever the hell. So the potential is definitely there, but again, if the gun doesn't work, why? In the interest of just experimentation, we're gonna try out taming the recoil a little with just a flashlight mounted and used as sort of a forward thumb stop or a gas pedal. The gun doesn't really need it with this load, but I'm just curious as to if it's useful. And I dipped like mad, and we still didn't even chamber around. Let's try that without the flinch, though. That's actually pretty effective now that I'm a little more used to it. This is the wrong ammunition. Now, to take the recoil mitigation question to its logical extreme, we have the rail space, so we're going to test this out with an angled foregrip and hopefully not shoot my forefinger off in the process. Well, I just started pulling the trigger and not aiming, and the results kind of speak for themselves. The squared off trigger guard doesn't really give you a great place to put the thumb. Looks like it would work, but it just kind of cuts in. Still, could be fun. Yeah, that's just pain. To really take advantage of that accuracy, of course we are going to want an optic. And the Desert Eagle's non-reciprocating fixed barrel seems like a good platform, but this is where my problems with the gun really started, before we even pulled the trigger. This top rail, and presumably this bottom one, though I didn't test, isn't actually in spec. It's not Picatinny, it's not Weaver, and in order to get something mounted to it, we needed to find a solution that had single mounting points. In this case, these Monstrum scope rings. Legacy Aimpoint electronic mounts didn't work. Fancy modern Reptilia mounts didn't work. Trust me, it is not in spec. So the optic we've decided on is this Ultra Dot Match Dot 2. This is the green Match Dot 2. It's their newest offering from one of the oldest pistol sight companies in existence. We'll get it sighted in and see how it and these kind of unusual mounts hold up. we're at the end of what it looks like is going to be the first day and have shot nearly 400 rounds of ammunition. It has not been issue-free. From the recommended ammo, we have what looks like 5 total malfunctions. All of them were failures to feed. Not a single failure to extract, failure to eject. Everyone was a live round going into the gun. The first one may have been grip-related, so we'll chalk that one off. And the others seemed to abate after we re-lubricated the gun. We didn't have any further malfunctions from ammo from the recommended list. We also had very good luck with a light load of a Target Sports New Republic 158 grain 357. That did surprisingly well, all things considered. I think we had a total of what looks like 2 failures to feed from that, and those were after the 300 round mark. Now, we've lubed the gun a bit, but we haven't cleaned it at all. So we're looking at less than 10 malfunctions in that time. Gun is not broken in yet. We'll see how it stacks up with more use. Out of the non-recommended ammo, the Target Sports was the only one that did anything close to work. The Blazer, despite being pretty good ammo, ripped 6 failures in the first couple of magazines and then just continued to chug. We used it for some of the optic sighting because we were running out of other ammo that worked, and it never got better. We got 1 magazine towards the end where the Blazer cycled all the way through. Now, some other quick thoughts from our first day of shooting the gun. The ergos are, as alluded to earlier, really quite poor. The trigger pull is good, but this safety, I have fairly long fingers and I cannot get to that without completely unseating my grip. It just doesn't work. Slide release is doable but tough, and the mag release is also pretty hard to get to. There's no using that without losing your grip completely. So that's pretty much a failure across the board on the ergonomic front. And the trigger appears dead again. Interesting. That would be because the safety's on. There we go. All of that aside, one thing that kept coming out throughout the day that I kept just saying out loud every time we cut, sometimes before we cut, is that this gun is just fun to shoot. The sensation is, well, it's not really pleasant. You get slapped by that muzzle brake pretty much every time. Anyone near you is going to get the worst of it, but just mag after mag, even when it has problems, it's pretty easy to walk away with a smile on your face. Originally, we wanted to do a 1-day burn down, but the challenges of first-time filming piled up and the ammunition ran out. The eagle-eyed, among the 4 of you watching this, may have noticed some of the footage already has this revised form of the gun, which is what we're out here with on what is actually day 3. 4? We've been doing this for a while. Between the first few days, I've shot another 900 rounds, 800 from the recommended ammo list, and 100 more of those cheap New Republic cartridges it seemed to like. In that time, we've incurred 4 additional failures to feed and 3 slide locks with ammunition still in the magazine, all with the New Republic, which we've since discontinued using. Again, to the gun's credit, every single mouth, even with inadvisable ammunition, has been an FTF, and all but one of those was corrected with a quick tap to the back of the slide or just releasing it. For a pistol that's still breaking in, that isn't terrible. I bought an FNX 45 Tactical the same day as this beast and encountered 20 malfunctions within the first 2 boxes of ammunition. That said, I'm not normally forced to consult a list of dietary restrictions for a new gun, and certainly didn't for the FNX. We did have one other minor parts issue on that first day. The gun actually broke. I got it back, but the hammer retainer pin had actually, or not the hammer retainer pin, the bit that retains the firing pin for the hammer had slipped down on one of those shots.
No shit. It's back now?
It's back now. But since then, no breakages or other severe issues in the next 700 rounds. It is worth mentioning that these guns are very easy to field strip and get to all the major components. All right, so first we're just gonna grab another 15-yard standing group with the new setup. We've done this a couple times. Score to beat is about 3.5 inches. Let's take a look. I already see one flyer and I know exactly when I did that, but We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So a little better, about 3-inch spread there, bringing out to 4 with the flyer. So we'll say it's about the same with or without the optic, and regardless of the type of optic. To test the limits of this accuracy, we're going to take a rested 25-yard group, see if we can do any better than that 3.5 inches. And we have a slide lock with rounds still in the chamber. This has happened a couple times before. I think we might be limp wristing it, or limp resting it, I guess, due to this. Let's finish out the magazine. Yeah, definitely induced from this. Slides locked open. Let's go take a look. That group's even worse. Huh. So firing from a rested pistol is always hard, but we have a solid 6.5, 7-inch group here. My impression of 6 or 7 inches notwithstanding. And good horizontal split, but that is not wonderful. I guess we'll have to try it standing. With rested groups as something of a failure, we're just gonna try standing at 25, slow it down, see how we do. So much for slowing it down, let's take a look. The gun is so satisfying to shoot, you just want to keep squeezing the trigger no matter what happens, and the results kind of speak for themselves. So at 25, we got a couple very good hits right here, and then we spread out to a group that's nearly a foot across. So resting it did help a little bit, but not enough to really give us a good idea of the gun's mechanical accuracy. The blast is just too much. The raw satisfaction is just too much. It's tough to get an idea of where exactly it is, and I don't have a ransom rest to test with, so we'll live with it. Now, on to 50 yards, unsupported. I counted 6 good hits, not bad. Now on to 100 yards unsupported. This is still well within the effective range of 357. Couple good hits in there, but not many. So we're gonna take another rested group at 200. We just did one off camera and got pretty good results using the bottom stadia of the reticle to aim. So we're gonna give that another swing. That's a hit. That's a hit. All right, so the drop is just a lot more than I anticipated. I have to use the bottom sort of stadia of the reticle to hit that. So what is all this? Now, when shooting with friends, a number of them complained about the finger grooves on the original grip, hence this totally reasonable practical grip change. On the first day of filming, we found out that using a flashlight for support was actually pretty effective, so we've added this tandem cross accelerator to maximize adjustability, affordability, and handling. The Ultra Dot, while an interesting optic in its own right, was so different from every other pistol optic I've used that I couldn't really shake the feeling it was throwing me off. So we've added this RMR Footprint Gideon Alpha Red Dot. It's worth mentioning that both the dot on the mount and the mount on the rail came loose within about 200 rounds, so we fastened both down with blue Loctite. Both the Ultra Dot and the Monstrum scope rings we were testing stayed mounted and zeroed through a solid 200 rounds despite being bathed in carbon from the muzzle brake, which is a solid showing for both products. Alright, now recoil on this has been described as similar to a subcompact 9mm, but with the help of the GoPro we might actually be able to figure out how similar. So let's get a baseline with 357 first. Next, we're gonna try with subcompact 9mm. Next, we're going to try a full-size 9mm with a pretty hefty muzzle brake to match the integrated barrel porting and rotating bolt gas piston system of the Desert Eagle. This gun also has an optic. We'll get to why that's important in just a moment. Now, the 9 we're shooting isn't anything particularly special, so let's see how we do with a spicier variety. In this case, plus P plus subgun ammo, throwing out 450 foot-pounds of force. Sure enough, the 357 beats out a small 9mm for recoil control and only falls behind a full-size 9 with a muzzle brake, though over-spec ammo tips the scales back to the Desert Eagle. In owning and shooting this gun, one question keeps coming up. What about the 50? Well, I wanted this review to focus on the 357, and converting it costs nearly $1,100 when you factor in the barrel, bolt, springs, and magazine, which is a lot of money, especially when only for a little bit more you can get another Desert Eagle. Reporting for authentic first impressions, first shot, Desert Eagle 50 Action Express. That is way more controllable than it has any right to be. Let's do some more. That's not an exaggeration. This gun will forcefully reposition your hands to wherever it damn well pleases, but it doesn't hurt to shoot in the same way a .44 Magnum revolver or a .357 snub nose might. Now that might be because even without a brake, this Mark 19 is a full pound heavier than the L6 we were testing in 357. That was awesome. First, we'll get a recoil shot to compare with the others. Unsurprisingly, more than twice the power means more than twice the recoil, even with an extra pound of gun. And what about accuracy? Now, this is honestly a hard gun to get a group with. I come from shooting a 357 snubnose with full power loads, and even I get a flinch inside about half a magazine of this thing. So we're gonna try 3 rounds of slow fire and see if we can get something resembling a group. Now luckily, we can tell the difference between our 50 holes and our earlier holes. One of these is new, one of these is blown off from a previous one, so we're at about 2.5 inches. That's more mechanical accuracy than we've been getting with the 357, but admittedly a much, much smaller number of shots. Now, I have no idea what the drop on 50 Action Express looks like, but we can spend $10 yeeting at 100 yards. Little high. That's a hit. That's a twitch. So we've been doing just fine with isosceles shooting stance, but remember the manual says weaver only. So we're gonna see in isosceles if we can limp wrist the gun one-handed. First with just 1 round so I don't drop it and blow my head off. Pretty good. Action locked open, no issues. All right, now we're gonna try 2 rounds, see if we can limp wrist it. Isosceles shooting stance, one-handed. Which is not normally how I'd shoot one-handed. Not the best shots, but the gun cycles. And what about reliability? Well, in the first 60 rounds, or $120 of shooting, we've had no malfunctions after the first 2 magazines, one of which claimed a chunk of my friend's thumb, but apparently pleased the machine spirit enough to prevent further issues. Like the 357, this gun comes with a recommended ammo list, and for the most part we've been shooting these Hornady XTP hollow points, 300 grains, which are the most affordable and available at $1.70 to $2.20 a round. Over the next 60 rounds, some of which you're going to see shortly, we had a few issues with the gun going into battery from slide lock, a failure to feed, and more distressingly, 2 instances of the disassembly lever actuating under recoil. And we have a big fucking problem here. It looks like under recoil, the barrel and slide release has come undone. We are back in battery, but that is frightening. All right, for real last time with the 50 Action Express bill drill. Whew. And we have dynamically disassembled the gun once more. This is a concerning malfunction. It's worth mentioning that the only ammunition we tried off the recommended ammo list had a failure to feed literally every time. And now, one test of accuracy, recoil, and rate of fire. We're going to do bill drills from 7 yards with each of our guns, the Glock 26, the Beretta, the 357 Desert Eagle, and the 50 cal. We're going to not only get a final time for each of those groups, but measure how much raw force each gun can put down range in a second. First up, G26. And we are on to the Beretta. All right, now we are moving on to 357 on a new target. We're going to take this a little slow just to make sure we get some good results. Now we are finally moving on to 50 Action Express. We had some issues getting this to go into battery, so we're going to take our sweet time with the groups, make sure we get a good reading, all A zones. So there you have it. Recoil mitigation in a powerful round puts the 357 Desert Eagle ahead of 9mm in raw firepower, with the 50 Action Express making a mockery of them all with over twice as much force downrange as its smaller sibling. Now on to something more interesting. Armor testing. So first we're just going to detonate a grapefruit for science. The first time we did this I just skimmed it and we didn't have the camera set up for slow-mo. So let's see if we can get a better hit this time around. Well, fuck. To give the Desert Eagle the best chance, we're using these jacketed flat points from off the recommended ammo list. It's not a great shape for penetration, but pushing 1,550 foot-pounds out of a 6-inch barrel, we're talking about nearly 50% more energy than an AR-15 running a 16-inch barrel. Next, we're moving up to NIJ Level 2, or HG1, by the new System Armor. This is soft armor rated to stop 9mm, so we're not expecting much. Yeah, that didn't work very well. So to save time, we did all of the shooting in one go, but we'll talk about the armor results separately. First up, we have the level 2 or HG1 armor. We have a pretty clear entry wound on the front here, but the bullet has been distributed out through the armor, and we don't actually have an exit hole on the back. That said, this was kind of the loosest wrap because it's the thinnest and softest, so it's the easiest to kind of deform. And this is the grapefruit that was inside that armor, this thoroughly chunked one. So I'm not a big one for the FUD lore of breaking ribs and blowing out lungs through body armor, but if there was a round to do it, this would be the one. Now we're moving on up to NIJ level 3A or HG2 by the new standards. This is rated to stop a 44 Magnum, and we're shooting out nearly 50% more energy than that, so this should be interesting. Yeah, that also didn't seem to work too good, but let's take a look. All right, we have our level 3A or HG2 armor. This actually looks a little worse off than our HG1 or level 2 armor. We have about 4 inches of back face deformation, huge punch here. I can't quite find the bullet in it, but it's got to be in there somewhere. And the grapefruit is actually this horribly mangled one here. So yet again, we might be talking about hits through armor being FUD lore, but I ain't want to give first aid to that. Finally, we have NIJ level 3 or RF1 by the new classification hard armor. This is rated to stop intermediate caliber rifle threats like 7.62 by 39 and 5.56 by 45, but we're using something with a bit more oomph than even the spicier varieties of those two cartridges. So we'll see how it works. Here we go. And at last, the level 3 or RF1 armor. This is a hard plate, but we have an enormous sort of amount of excavation on the front here where the aluminosilicate has been caved out completely. I can't actually see or hear the round in here, but it looks like it was stopped pretty thoroughly there, and we only have maybe 1 inch of back face deformation. It's worth noting that none of the grapefruit that were strapped to the back of it even split the skin. So I would say RF1 or old NIJ level 3 armor is pretty solid proof against 50 Action Express. Now, because we're out here and we have some level 3 armor to test with, let's just do some M855A1 bonus content. See how it holds up. So with an inconclusive first shot, we're going to do one more round of M855A1. And finally, for our bonus content, we took a couple shots of M855A1 out of its supposedly optimal 16-inch barrel length to see how it would affect this armor, which is not quite rated for it. This is not special threat armor. And we have an entrance and a downward deflection on one of the shots. It split the back here, but no exit wound, and another entrance and downward deflection on the second shot with the possibility of a small exit wound here. So I have a hard time going one way or the other on this. I would say it's not fully proof against M855A1, definitely not multi-hit rated, but it definitely has an effect. It's slowing it down enough to deflect it out. Might hit your squishy bits with some spall, but a hell of a lot better than nothing. On the way back from our first day of filming, the dear friend helping me with audio and camera prophetically asked, "This might be a stupid question, but what is this gun even for?" And we talked. It's too big for any sort of carry, even outside the waistband, and in the true wilderness where you want its raw power, you'd also want the ironclad reliability of a revolver. In .357, at 10 or 11 rounds, you're not getting all that much more capacity than the 8 of the larger Smiths. Any situation where you need its reach or power would be better served by a carbine, which wouldn't even weigh all that much more. The .50 brings insane first-shot power to the table, but where cold, snow, and mud reign, I'd want the reliability and second strike capability of a double-action revolver. I can't think of any lightly armored medium game, though I suppose it would probably do a number on a vehicle or its occupants. So what can we conclude? Ergonomics are, frankly, terrible. The low slide eliminates most of the space you'd use for your support, or really either thumb. The safety is impossible to reach without breaking your grip, as is the mag release for that matter. Oh my god, this gun. Taking my time. And the optics mounting is subpar. The trigger is the best of these controls with a whopping fine. Reliability is honestly better than expected after some initial teething pains, though we've encountered some issues on the 50 even with recommended ammo. That said, the raw cost of ammunition means we still have less than 200 rounds through it, so if it needs breaking in, it hasn't gotten it yet. I have a hard time calling this anything other than below average overall. So at this point, we'd recorded the whole end of this video when I decided to take the 357 model to a match. Expecting to get some cool footage and data, I was instead greeted with a broken extractor at the end of the first stage. And by broken, I mean this. Metal sheared all the way through. I contacted Magnum Research and they provided a replacement free of charge, which frankly I prefer to having to ship in the gun, but this is a pretty vital part that broke after only 1,600 rounds as opposed to tens of thousands. I would, at the very least, keep a spare on hand since they're only, that's air quotes there, $50. Now we've shot another 200 rounds through the gun, including 50 at in-range TVs and/or brutality, with no further issues, but still, keep all this in mind. Accuracy will always be better than the shooter due to raw blast or recoil. These are hard guns to shoot well, though the 357 certainly shines brighter in this respect. The aftermarket is not great. Unless you want to switch calibers, which brings the cost we described earlier, or barrel lengths, which is only possible in some calibers, there isn't much to do aside from an optic and fancy grips, which I have of course immediately done. This holster from Polar Tactical, who also has some great Desert Eagle content, is pretty much the only option if you've actually mounted an optic. No pouch is made for these mags! These guns are begging for a pistol brace or even full SBR conversion, which I would pay a truly unreasonable amount of money for. Which leaves radness. For middling at best scores across the board, these guns just rule. The 357 is fun to shoot and can hit far and tight to boot, and the 50 is an inordinate powerhouse that stops just shy of hurting. So what's the point? The Desert Eagle is a deeply flawed piece of interesting engineering. If you're at the point where you're collecting guns based on unique operating mechanisms or histories, the Desert Eagle is interesting enough to add to your collection, but if you haven't filled out your stable with more common, practical pieces, this gun should stay on the shelf, especially given the price probably written underneath it. The Second Amendment is for everyone. The Desert Eagle absolutely is not. But you should never turn down the chance to shoot one and see if you fall in love. Like, grudging respect, used disrespect. It's just fun to shoot.